I see a face. That's exciting. It's nice to see some faces. Okay, recording. Welcome everyone. My name is Erin Pideaux. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a program manager at the Homeless Services Division at Multnomah County. And I'm helping to lead our community's response to the continuum of care NOFO alongside a really awesome team, Brittany, Maddie, Nicole, and many others. We really, really appreciate you all being here this morning with us on, I know, short notice and the day before a holiday. And I just really wanted to sort of welcome folks, and then I'm going to hand it over to Homebase pretty quickly. But I just wanted to take a moment to say this is unprecedented times. And the Continuum of Care NOFO this year presents really significant challenges for our community and communities across the country. And it requires us to really quickly make some really big pivots in our community. And so we're working really hard to do that and support providers as much as possible as we go through it. And I know there are folks in this space that are current continuum of care recipients. There are folks who are new to the continuum of care and perhaps doing transitional housing or shelter or street outreach work in our community. We need all of you to respond to this NOFO. It's going to definitely be kind of an all hands on deck, like all of us in it together, figuring out the best response. And we're really excited for you to be here with us and to get to sort of like learn about what the next steps are and to ask some questions. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Just really appreciate you all. It's going to be recorded. We'll send the slides out right after today's presentation. So you'll have the slides available to you right afterwards. And we're all available for questions and ongoing support after today as well. I'm going to hand it over to Maddie and Nicole.
Great. Thanks so much, Erin. So like Erin said, my name is Maddie Nation. I work for Homebase. Homebase is a nonprofit technical assistance provider that's been hired by Multnomah County to help facilitate this funding competition. And along with my colleague, Nicole Thomas, we're going to be leading today's session, but we're also kind of inviting folks to ask questions as we go along. And like Erin said, Erin, Brittany, Nicole, and I all work kind of hand in hand. So happy to ask all the questions, and we'll figure out kind of who's the best person to answer them. Kind of right up top, just wanted to put emails up on the screen. And again, you'll get a follow-up email with all of the materials from today as well as the recording. But this is going to be the best way to get in contact with us over the next 2 weeks as you're working on preparing your applications. If you email that first Multnomah NOFO email, that goes to both Nicole and I, and then Brittany will help us kind of triage the other emails as well. So encourage you to reach out as you have questions. We're here for 2 hours today, and we're going to start by talking through an overview of the 2025 HUD CoC Notice of Funding Opportunity, which, as Erin mentioned, had many significant changes that are really going to impact the way this competition is run. So we're going to take some time really talking about those. Then we're going to discuss the CoC's plan for renewal projects, or sort of the existing projects receiving this funding, and then new project funding and how folks can apply for that new money. And then we're going to close off by talking about how to complete the required application materials, the timeline, and then sort of the immediate next steps moving forward. And before we get into it, these are just a couple tips and reminders. We're going to go over a lot today, and you do not need to memorize everything that we talk about. Instead, really, I would encourage everyone to just listen for major themes and know that the follow-up materials are coming to you and you can read them and digest them with a little bit more time. It's also really important that everybody understands that there are two parts to this competition. There's a local competition and a national competition, and we're going to be talking about both parts today, and they are not the same, although there are some overlapping elements. So kind of more information to come about that, but wanted to just state that up front. Like we said, we're going to be sharing materials. And as we're figuring out the chat, folks are welcome to put questions in the chat. Nicole and I will switch off on monitoring those questions, as well as Erin and Brittany, and we'll answer things that are coming up there. And I also have a couple of specific spots where we'll we will pause and folks will be welcome to come off mute and ask their questions out loud as well. So we're here to help as much as possible. There is also kind of a lot that's still unknown about this competition. So we will be transparent when we don't know things, and write down your question and follow up if we can get answers to them. I see a raised hand from Annie. Annie, do you want to come off mute and ask a question?
I think I'm off mute. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. I do have a question. I would love to put it in the chat, but it says the chat is disabled. Would you like me to just
Okay.
ask it or drop or
Yes. Please
okay.
ask it.
So I have an eligibility question that I also emailed out. I just want to kind of clear it up before I go any further. It seems that the funding notice is saying that any organizations that are distributing harm reduction supplies, like safe smoking or injection supplies, are not eligible at all for this grant. Is that correct?
Erin, do you want to answer that question?
I was going to go pull up the language in the NOFO. We can also follow up with you, Annie. I mean, Maddie and Nicole, please feel free to jump in. But yes, there's language in the NOFO that pretty explicitly says they will not provide grants to projects if the organization engages in harm reduction activities. They list the harm reduction activities that they kind of consider harm reduction. So I'm going to pull that language and put it in the chat. And I think we know that that puts number of our providers and honestly the county at risk of not being eligible for these funds. So honestly, it falls into the category of things that we're just like going to do our best to navigate, and we'll see what happens. But Maddie and Nicole, do you have anything to add to that? Yeah.
Great. Is there anything else that folks want to ask before we get into it? Bill, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, hey, this is Bill with the Homeless Services Department. Just as a reminder to everybody, we're trying to elevate everybody to the panelist feature, so you'll get a little reminder in your that will, once you're a panelist, it'll allow you to see and access the chat. So just look for that little invitation. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. All right, and I see that the language about harm reduction ended up in the chat for folks to reference. And then I also see a question in here, is there a number of grants or organizations that you're picking? And I think as we get into it, the answer to that will start to be clear. The answer is, as a preview, there's not a specific number, but there is like an amount of funding available. Okay. So let's get started by talking about an overview of the 2025 Continuum of Care Notice of Funding Opportunity Competition. So we're all here today because HUD released a notice of funding opportunity for the Continuum of Care funding. For those of you that have existing Continuum of Care funding or your renewal projects, you'll remember that during last year's competition, HUD had used a power granted to them by Congress to decide that they would move forward with a 2-year competition cycle instead of a 1-year competition cycle. Unfortunately, the Trump administration reversed that decision and announced that we would have another competition this year. And they made that announcement in July. That announcement included a lot of vague language that there would be significant changes, but didn't tell us really kind of what they would be. And then the official notice was released on November 13th with a due date of January 14th. So that means this year's competition is 60 days long over several holidays. And we've typically seen more of an 80 to 90 day time length much earlier in the year. So I think that is all important context. If you thought to yourself, hey, I thought we weren't supposed to have a competition this year, you were right, we weren't. But we are now kind of moving forward with one. So the HUD Continuum of Care program is the single largest federal funding stream for responding to homelessness in the United States. HUD uses this to try to accomplish policy priorities related to homelessness. And I have this year's policy priorities on screen. The way that they do this is they create both incentives for individual projects to follow these priorities, as well as the continuum of care as a whole. And we see that this year's policy priorities are significantly different than what we've seen in previous competitions. So I'll just read them out loud for folks. So we see that there is a priority for ending the crisis of homelessness on our streets, a priority to prioritize treatment and recovery, advance public safety, promote self-sufficiency, improve outcomes, and then minimize trauma. So these are all kind of a significant pivot from what we have seen in the past, which has been a real focus on racial equity, housing first, and permanent housing. And as we go through the rest of our slides, you'll see kind of how these are going to impact the way that the competition is designed. Here's what's really essential to understand about the policy shifts before we get into it more. So the first thing to understand is that HUD has made this year's competition much more competitive, both at the local level and at the national level. HUD is requiring communities to make really large scale changes in a really short amount of time and compete against each other and within the national arena while they do it. To that effect, permanent housing has been capped at 30% of our annual renewal demand this year. The annual renewal demand is the amount of money it would take to fully refund all of the projects that are currently operating with continuum of care funding. And we know that they're going to cap that at 30% this year. So this means that most of our existing permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing projects, and joint transitional housing, rapid rehousing projects will not be refunded in their current form under this competition. And we're going to talk a lot more about what that means in the coming slides. Overall, HUD is really prioritizing short-term models and required services models. And this is a monumental shift away from permanent housing, which has been the priority for about the last decade, toward transitional housing, as well as a shift away from housing first and toward required services models. And that will have impacts on the types of projects that folks are putting forward and what's going to be competitive kind of in the national sphere. So this slide provides an overview of the funding available during this continuum of care competition. In total, the annual renewal demand this year is $36.1 million. So again, an annual renewal demand is the amount that it takes to fully fund all existing continuum of care projects locally, or what's also referred to as renewal projects. This year, the tier 1 of the ranked list is going to be 30% of the annual renewal demand, meaning that we have almost guaranteed funding for 30% of the total cost it would take to re-up our existing projects. And we'll talk more about that on the next slide. Then there's going to be about $7 million available for new projects through CoC bonus, which is a significant increase from previous years. And then we have $1.3 million available for new projects through DV bonus. So DV bonus is specific to domestic violence providers. CoC bonus and DV bonus funding can both be used for new projects. The primary difference is that CoC bonus funding can be used for all eligible projects serving folks experiencing homelessness, while DV bonus is a separate pot of funding entirely for new projects that serve people who are fleeing domestic violence, sexual assault, or human trafficking. And then finally, we have $1.5 million available for planning funding. These are funds that can only be applied for by the Continuum of Care Lead, HSD. So you don't really need to pay much attention to that pot for the purposes of what we're talking about today. These funds are not competitive with housing projects. They kind of just exist off to the side. So they don't play into what we're going to talk about with the priority listing. And I'll pause for questions after this next slide. So what does this mean? What am I even really talking about when I'm talking about a priority listing? Each year, HUD requires that we run a local competition where we develop a priority listing of all the projects that apply for funding. The priority listing basically tells HUD what our local prioritization is for funding. So another way to talk about that is we rank projects in the order of how the community wants to see them funded, with the project at the very top being the project the community most wants to see funded, and the last project being the one that is least kind of prioritized within the community. So we have to submit that list to HUD of everybody that submits an application. And the way that we develop those criteria are through the continuum of care. They decide on objective factors that can be used to decide what the ranking should be. Every year, this list is split into 2 tiers based on how much funding HUD tells us is safe. So funding in tier 1 is generally considered safe or basically guaranteed for the continuum of care. And that means that all projects that end up ranked in tier 1 are likely to be funded. By contrast, Tier 2 is funding that is highly competitive. And so we're unsure if HUD is going to give us this funding. HUD makes decisions about who in Tier 2 is going to be funded based on the overall CoC application score. So the whole CoC has to submit a big written narrative where they talk about what they've accomplished in the last year, and HUD scores that. It's also based on each project's relative position on the list. And this year, it also includes each project's commitment to requiring supportive services. So historically, for folks who have been around a while, Tier 1 has been about 80 to 95% of the annual renewal demand or the cost of re-upping all of our projects. So we would usually expect Tier 1 to be much bigger. The percentage of projects we thought would be safe would be much bigger. This year, HUD has slashed Tier 1 to just be, again, 30% of the cost of re-upping all of our projects, or just over $10.8 million. By comparison, the Tier 2 amount this year is huge, which means our Tier 2 is going to be, again, much bigger and have the majority of our projects in it. So what's included in Tier 2 is the 70% of the cost of re-upping all of our projects that isn't in Tier 1 this year, as well as the CoC bonus and the DV bonus amounts. So folks that get ranked in Tier 2 are subject to a lot more uncertainty. Folks in Tier 1 are relatively safe, and the percentages have kind of flipped this year in what we would typically expect to see. So I know that that was a lot of information, and I want to take a pause to take any questions. I see Christine has a hand raised.
Yes, your email said that you welcome new CBOs. Should we bother to apply? Because I heard you say for those who have been doing this for years.
Yeah, no, new organizations are absolutely invited to apply, and there is a lot of funding available. What I'm talking about right now is just sort of the uncertainty of the funding. So you'll apply, and there'll be a local competition where you'll be put in this ranked list. And then there is a national competition where HUD decides if the project will get funded or not. So we absolutely welcome new CBOs to apply this year, and there is a ton of new project funding available, like we talked about on this slide, these two DV bonus and CoC bonus amounts. Any other questions that folks have? Giovanni?
Yeah, just real quick. You guys are with Multnomah County. We've also gotten emails about this NOFO through Clackamas County. Does it matter which we apply with? Can we apply with both? Both counties?
Yeah, you can absolutely apply through both counties. This is a national competition that also happens at the local level across 450 continuums of care in the country. And so every kind of community has their own process that they run to do the local part of the competition, but it's all the same big funding pool.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Anybody else questions you want to ask? I see Jose Luis.
Yeah, relating to the last question, because we also provide services in multiple counties. If we applied in Multnomah County, can we provide services outside of Multnomah County? Or is it restricted to this county only? Because that will also help us. If it's the same funding, will help us decide how much work we'll put into one application.
Yeah, so when you get an award through the continuum of care, you're actually getting it through your local continuum of care. So you would be restricted to services and housing projects that are within the geographic boundaries of this CoC. So you would be limited to Multnomah County. If you wanted to run kind of a multi-county thing, you would need to apply in the separate counties, and you would need to kind of keep grant administration for both projects completely separate so that you could track who was in Multnomah County versus, for example, Clackamas County or Washington County. So it's not the most conducive funding for a regional approach. But the
Thank you.
requirements at the federal level would be the same. So there are pros and cons to that. Christine in the chat asked, does each state receive a certain amount of money? Because you said it's national. It's not the states that receive money. It's actually a local governing body called the Continuum of Care, which is kind of like a quasi-governmental agency or entity that's a kind of group of volunteers running homelessness response. And each continuum of care gets an allocation of funding that just changes based on the geographic area. In some parts of the state, a continuum of care can include multiple counties. In this part of the state, this continuum of care is just Multnomah County. Does anybody else have any questions?
I have a question, and I'm sorry, I'm pretty new to all this. We lost some Multnomah County funding as a HSD provider that ends, we found it out very recently at the end of this year instead of June 30th. Would any of this continuum of care be eligible for the loss in that funding, or does this not apply? I'm a little bit confused on that.
Yeah. Erin, do you feel good about answering that question?
I was distracted, so can you ask it one more time? I heard part of it. I heard
Yeah.
that you lost HSD funding, but can you ask the second part again?
Yeah, I'll ask again. We lost our Multnomah County funding very abruptly after a series of ups and downs, hearing that we had it, hearing we didn't, hearing we had it, and then we finally found out we didn't. It
Yep.
ends on the 31st of December versus June 30th. Still working on that,
Yeah.
but I'm kind of looking at this as a replacement model for funding, and I'm wondering if this would even apply to us or not.
I don't, so I would say if the project that lost funding fits into one of the project categories that Maddie is going to go over soon, so it would be street outreach or transitional housing, then yes, this is definitely something we would want you to consider. I'm not familiar enough with your organization or what lost funding to know whether it fits into this, but I think we'll be able to answer that question as we go, and happy to also check in one-on-one
Okay,
or through an email if there's like a more program specific thing.
I appreciate that very much.
Great. And we also have a question in the chat from Dina, that is saying, is it true in order to qualify for this funding, we need to take down any DEI language or culturally specific language from all forms and websites? This is another thing that falls in the category, I believe, of like, we're not exactly sure. So there is contract language in addition to the harm reduction piece that someone had mentioned earlier. There's also language about not engaging. I think it's in, somebody can put it in the chat, but it's in like illegal discrimination against folks by having preferences for LGBTQ folks or different racial groups. And we have seen kind of HUD use that sort of language to penalize organizations that do have racial equity information on their website, just to be frank with folks. But I think there is kind of a lot up in the air about that still, what the interpretation means, how it actually applies to organizations that are doing that work, how it fits within this funding stream. And so anyway, it's a non-answer, but the answer is we don't totally know.
And I'll just add that this is one of the many places in the NOFO where I expect there to be legal action, and what's like HUD is putting out a lot of policy in this NOFO that's in contradiction with the law. And so that's something I think our strategy locally is like apply for the funding, try to be as competitive as we can to get as many federal dollars as we can, and also pursue legal strategy where that makes sense and see. So I think it's just all strategies at once a little bit right now, if that helps.
We had one more question in the chat, then we'll go to raised hands from Laura. Can you send us the information so we can find the applications for Clackamas and Washington County? Each continuum of care runs their own application process. So the best way to find out information about the Clackamas and Washington County continuum of care's process would be to sign up for their individual kind of mailing lists and listservs. Yeah, that is what I would suggest. They likely have information posted on their website as well. That's one of the requirements of this funding stream. Whitney, did you have a question?
Yeah, and you may be getting to this later, but I was curious if we are moving from either currently having the TH or the transitional housing slash rapid rehousing or just a rapid rehousing program, and we are now want to be applying for a transitional housing program, will that be seen as supplanting, or are we allowed to do that?
Yeah, you're
Okay.
absolutely allowed to do that within the
Phew.
the continuum of care structure. Yeah, huge relief. And we're going to talk exactly about that in the next couple of slides. So I'm going to use that as a chance to keep us going. So on the slide right now, you see kind of the flip of the tiers. We see the key takeaway here is tier one is much smaller than it's been historically. In addition to the much smaller tier one, HUD has also placed this 30% cap on how much permanent housing we can request, as we've already talked about a little bit. So in this case, permanent housing refers to permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, and joint transitional housing and rapid rehousing. This is a huge pivot on HUD priorities. For the past decade, HUD has prioritized permanent housing for funding. So as a result, our community currently uses 96% of our available funding for permanent housing. And that is going to need to shift. The vast majority of permanent housing programs this year will need to pursue reallocation or a transition grant, like Whitney was just referring to, and we'll talk about those in a second. So with input from the CoC board, the Collaborative Applicant Committee, and then other community partners, the CoC has decided to prioritize kind of two big categories for the 30% available permanent housing. Those two categories are going to be renewal PSH projects with the highest performance outcomes, and then renewal PSH projects where the CoC funding is integral to the operation of a larger affordable housing project. So that means the project is kind of so enmeshed within a larger affordable housing project that if they lost the CoC funding, they would also lose additional units within that larger affordable housing project. So again, functionally, this means that the majority of renewal PSH projects and RRH projects and then joint transitional housing and rapid rehousing projects are not going to be able to reapply for their current project types. There is going to be opportunity to apply for transitional housing or street outreach, which we will talk about in a few slides. But I want to take just one more pause to make sure that that makes sense to everybody and there's no questions about what's on this slide. So this is the last slide of overview for this year's competition, but this is just an overview of what's going to happen with the competition, the changes to accommodate these HUD policy shifts, and just the realities of the timeline that we have to work in within this year. So for the renewal project scoring tool, we've removed all qualitative measures and focused entirely on quantitative performance. We also had to remove quantitative measures that focused on racial equity per HUD's new requirements. So it just left things like exits to housing, grant spend down, increase in client income, and other kind of quantitative factors. For new project scoring tools, we're going to be really focusing on applications from two project types this year, transitional housing and street outreach, to reflect HUD's new priorities. We've also adjusted these scoring tools to align them with some new threshold requirements from HUD to make sure that our community can maximize funding from the continuum of care source. And as we go through, we know that some of the changes we're going to talk about are really not in alignment with the values of this community, but trying to walk that balance of knowing that there's a deep need for homelessness response funding in this community along with those values. So and then the last thing is, we just talked about this on the last slide, but the ranking process for the priority listing is going to also mirror the NOFO requirements. The CoC won't be accepting permanent housing applications that exceed 30% of that annual renewal demand funding, because we just know HUD's not going to fund that this year. And there's also a new option for the ranking and review panel to put coordinated entry and HMIS projects at the bottom of tier one, so those resources are not lost to this community. So we're going to go more into what that means for each of the project types in the following slides, but this slide was just meant to give you a broad overview of kind of what's going to change about the competition if you are familiar with it. Okay, so we're going to start by talking about renewal project funding, and then we're going to switch to talk about new project funding. So folks who are newer to this funding source, just hold on kind of for another minute, and we will get to the new project funding then. So again, the majority of existing projects, renewal projects this year, are going to be asked to reallocate or transition their grant. So for the 30% of permanent housing that we can apply for, HSD contacted renewal PSH projects that are going to be asked to renew their funding there yesterday or today. And then for all other permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, and joint transitional housing and rapid rehousing, the CoC will be asking them to make a decision to reallocate or transition their renewal grants. Reallocating a grant means that you give up your grant and then the funding goes back into the big pool of available funding that can be accessed by new project applicants. If you are a renewal provider, you can reallocate your grant and you could apply for a new grant. So you push your money back in and then you take money out. Or you can transition your grant where you hold on to the money that you had and you say, oh, I have a rapid rehousing project right now. I want to make that into a transitional housing project. And we'll talk about kind of the pros and cons of both approaches. So for a transition grant, that is when you are transitioning an eligible renewal project from one type to another over the course of a year. So if you currently have a rapid rehousing project, you could say, we're going to be a transitional housing project by the end of our next operating period. And then you have a 1-year period to move your project from a rapid rehousing project to a transitional housing project. At the end of your operating year, you need to be operating as the new project type. So you will have to be kind of a fully fledged transitional housing project by the end of your operating year. And then starting the next year, you will be a transitional housing project starting the day after your renewal grant expires. You can apply for the same amount of money that you currently have in your transition grant. So you just say, we're using this same money, we're doing something different with it. You will have to kind of figure out how to exit your clients your current clients during that time period and start to serve eligible clients and conduct eligible activities for a transitional housing grant during that time period. So the real benefit to the transition grant is it gives you a lot more runway to rehouse your current clients and kind of transition your project type without any sort of interruption in service. As of now, it is important to note that we believe that grants that were funded through DV bonus are not eligible to use the transition grant process. That's a little bit up in the air still. There's a lot of questions out to HUD about that, but our current understanding is that DV bonus renewal projects cannot do a transition grant. This slide just gives kind of the pros and cons of a transition grant versus reallocating your grant and applying for a new project. So like we talked about, the transition grant, it gives you a 1-year period to transition the grant, exit your current clients. If you do a transition grant, you have to keep or reduce your current grant amount. So you can only apply for how much money you have or less money. You have to keep your current operating date. So if your program is June to July right now, it's going to be June to July under this next program type. And again, not currently available to DV renewal grants. A reallocation, so you push your money back in and then you apply for a new project, you take new money out. Your current program that you have, so if you're a rapid rehousing provider, the end operating date will be the end of your program and you will have to close out your program, have all your clients exited by the end of your operating period, and then you'll have to go through the process of starting up a new grant again, which can be administratively quite difficult. But you are able to adjust your grant amount. So you say, oh, our grant amount isn't really working for us. We wish we had a lot more money. You can do that if you apply for a fully new project in a way you can't with a transition grant. And you can also adjust your operating dates. So if right now you all are June and July and you wish that you could move October to September, that's something you can do with a reallocation and new project that you can't do with a transition grant. But also kind of with the asterisk that HUD is really unpredictable with awards. We saw that this year. So you could put out your ideal dates and then it turns out it's delayed past what you thought it would be. The other thing to think about with reallocation and new project is if you give your money back and you're applying for a new project, there can be a funding gap if you change your operation dates or awards are delayed. So that can lead to staffing issues and cause layoffs and things like that. So there are definitely kind of pros and cons to transition versus reallocation plus new project. And I know that that was highly technical for folks that are new to the funding and even folks who are maybe more familiar with the funding, but wanted to lay that out because that's one of the decisions that renewal providers are really going to be faced with in the coming weeks. So I want to pause for questions and hear if anybody wants to talk about this more.
I have a quick comment, if I could. I'm not trying to monopolize this, I promise. But there are some of these acronyms that are coming through really quickly. I understand what the CoC and HUD is, but there's some other ones that have flown by that could you just maybe, if they're not super common in this language, say what those acronyms mean? And I don't have a slide to refer to because it was several slides back, but there were several flying by very quickly, and it gets a little bit confusing.
Okay. Yeah, we'll make a conscious effort moving forward to do that.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Tanika has a question. What if we have a subcontract with a DV focused program for rapid rehousing? Tanika, could you come off mute and talk a little bit more about what your question is?
Well, I was hoping that Christina would be on here because she manages, but we have a subcontract with VOA through our rapid rehousing program. So I'm just curious because it says that the DV, they're not available for this grant. So would we not be able to work with a subcontractor that may not be eligible? I don't really know how to word it because Christina's not on this call, but Brittany, I know you're kind of aware of our program, our subcontractor with VOA, but those are women. Go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry, Tanika, I didn't mean to cut you off. I saw Maria raise her hand and I was wondering if she had something to speak to that.
Yeah, and to be honest, I might not, but I was going to say that I put it in the chat. I would argue those are not technically DSV projects. So I feel like they would be impacted differently than those that are completely dedicated, like you would get through these DV bonuses. So I think it applies to that project. And we have another project with SEI, if you're on the call, with the Haven project, which also has some DV set aside. It's within the same organization, so it's not quite a pass through, but they have a project that is serving multiple populations, let's say. I would argue as well that even though that project serves DV survivors and has set asides, essentially, that those are not, don't even quote me on this, but like true DV projects. They are in the sense of what we're doing, but for the context of the CoC. Now, TAs and Aaron, please correct me because that's my assumption.
Yeah, I think the important piece here is where they originally received funding and if it's through the Continuum of Care program. So if the project was funded as a Continuum of Care bonus project or just general new funding, and then you subcontracted with a domestic violence provider, then that is A-okay. You could do a transition grant with that. If it was a project that was originally funded through the domestic violence bonus funding, then that is one where you cannot do a transition grant. So from what I'm hearing, it sounds like it was maybe a Continuum of Care bonus program, and you could do a transition grant, but could you email us and we can double check so we know if you can qualify for a transition grant or not, if that's all how you want to move forward.
Okay, and I was referring to Christina Tetra from OJF. She's not on today, but okay. Thank you.
I'll just add, I think so. Brittany sent emails out last night and this morning to all of our rapid rehousing programs about kind of what their options are, and it includes whether or not you might be eligible for a transition grant. So not all of you were probably included on those, but leadership at your organizations was. And then again, like we're happy to follow up. But yes, I just want to confirm that unless it was a project that was specifically awarded under a DV bonus, then it is eligible for a transition grant. So the grant that you're speaking about that I believe is an Our Just Future grant would be eligible for a transition grant.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We also had a question in the chat from Allison. Would you be able to share the fiscal year 24 rating and ranking list, which is that priority listing, same thing, or point to where it is on the HSD website? Allison, do you know what you're looking for? Because I'm wondering if the rating and ranking priority list is going to be the best one for you, or if it would be better to send you a different document.
I'm just asking that question because we received some subcontracts from other agencies that do PSH. And I just want to know if they are tier one or tier two. So just if I could see the list of tier one and tier two recipients for PSH, that's all I need.
Yeah, so the priority listing last year was used for HUD to decide to make awards for this year's grant. And so you could see if they're in tier one and tier two, but that wouldn't necessarily let you know if they were funded or not. The document that would be, I think, helpful to send you would be the grants inventory worksheet. So maybe we could do that because that shows kind of the award amounts for the grants.
Works for me. Thank you.
Okay. Nicole, could you write that down?
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, I think I got to all the questions in the chat. Is there anything else folks are sitting on?
I just want to add for Allison's question. So I actually don't think they're great inventory worksheet. I think I understand like you want to know which other projects are being placed in tier one. I can just connect with you to make sure that you understand which projects that you are a sub grant on are impacted. So I can follow up with you. And notification did go out to all PSH projects this morning. So I think communication will get to subgrantees very soon, I imagine. But I'm happy to follow up offline about it, Allison.
Thanks, Erin.
Okay, so we've been talking about renewal projects or projects that currently receive funding through the continuum of care. And we were talking about, you know, for many projects, they'll be faced with this decision this year to reallocate or transition their grants. And we talked about what reallocation means, pushing the money back. You could apply for a new grant if you want. You could just push the money back entirely, or you can apply for a transition grant. So saying we have rapid rehousing right now, we'd like it to become transitional housing. Definitely a key question we know is it's on everybody's minds. It's on our minds. It's like what happens to current clients in continuum of care funded programs as either they make the transition or they're reallocated. And just to say it out loud, like this NOFO is going to result in a historically large loss of CoC funded permanent housing in our community. And right now it's really unclear if current permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing clients can move into transitional housing based on current program rules. This is a question people are asking across the country. And so hopefully there will be more guidance from HUD soon about what's going to happen to current clients. But the county is working with local leaders to try to minimize the impact of this shift on current clients. But this is also especially difficult in the context of local revenue reductions. So right now we are focused on the local competition and trying to maximize the beds and funding that we can receive through the continuum of care competition, which has a very tight timeline. But the work is really going to be kind of long-term in figuring out what happens to current clients in continuum of care funded programs that are reallocated or transitioned. So this is again kind of like a non-answer, but an answer that says like this is definitely top of mind and we're trying to figure out what happens next. Does anybody have any questions about that? I'm going to hand it over to Nicole, who is going to talk us through kind of new project funding. So if you had tuned out because you don't currently receive funding through the continuum of care, this is now a time to tune back in to hear about the new project types.
Yeah, thanks, Maddie. Before that, yeah, I don't know if Erin and Brittany you wanted to respond to Katrina's question in the chat, and then are there two new hands with Yaya and Giovanni?
Yeah, so Katrina asked, so for the last several years, Multnomah County has required equity plans and culturally responsive services with reporting that affirmed such. Thinking about the HUD language about racial preference and its performance look backs, is there a scenario where the county is planning for no or little funding and how to address that with local dollars? Great question, Katrina. This is one of the questions that's keeping me up at night. So I will say, one of the things that's really challenging is that the CoC NOFO is in direct conflict with our local values in a lot of different ways. The county is not backing down from our values around equity and culturally responsive services. And we are at the same time as we're not backing down on that with our like all of the other funding sources we have available to us, we are also trying to put together as competitive an application for this HUD continuum of care funding as possible. I think that the NOFO honestly is designed to take money away from communities like ours and give it to red community like other communities that have different approaches to this work. And again, like we're doing everything we can in this really short timeline to just put as competitive an application forward. And also, as I said, like there's definitely like a legal strategy that we're like thinking about very actively as well. I think that's the best I can do at the moment on that question.
Thanks, Erin. And then Yaya and Stephen, did you have questions on the renewal project funding before I get into the new project stuff?
Hey, everyone, this is Yaya, the President and CEO of the Afghan Support Network. We're going to be a new project. We're still thinking about if this makes sense for us or not. Um, I just wanted to know if you could just re-explain we're kind of new. What's the difference between transitional versus permanent housing? I feel like I know, but it'd be just good to have a clarification. And then, speaking of equity and all that kind of stuff, our organization is called the Afghan Support Network. And given some of the language in there, I'm like, should we even apply or just our name would disqualify us?
Yeah, so for the first question, we're going to talk about that more in a few slides, but the long and the short of it is like transitional housing is a time-limited intervention in that it's 1 to 24 months. And then folks are meant to move to permanent housing after that intervention, either permanent housing that's supported by additional funding or subsidy or permanent housing that somebody can pay for on their own. And then when we're talking about permanent housing, there's a couple of project types underneath that category that are considered longer term interventions. So permanent supportive housing, for example, has no time limit. Rapid rehousing is also a 1 to 24 months, but it's a little bit more of an intensive intervention, which is why it falls under permanent housing. And then joint transitional housing and rapid rehousing is a project type where folks could move from one project to another. And I don't think we should spend too much time on it because it's not even an eligible project type anymore. But the kind of long and the short, permanent housing is a long-term housing intervention. Transitional housing is more time limited. And then I think the second question is another one that's really up in the air about organizations that have names that are clearly kind of culturally specific organizations, if they should apply or not. We don't know. There's no rule against it, and there is a lot of new funding available. So we would encourage folks to apply if they are interested in this funding and feel like they are a good fit for the two project types we're going to talk about in a few slides here. But we have also seen HUD kind of take discriminatory action against organizations that have clear kind of culturally specific names. So again, it's something that's up in the air and potentially something quite ripe for legal action in the future. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Erin. Okay. Yeah. And then Stephen, did you have a question?
Yes. Would a 1-year transition project fall under Tier 1 or Tier 2 funding?
Yeah, so transition projects are only available to renewal projects. So projects that currently receive continuum of care funding and they can decide to transition their grant. So say we have this money right now, we want to use it for a different project type. And projects that apply as transition grants will be in Tier 2. The only things that are in Tier 1 this year are permanent supportive housing projects that are in like that's up to the cap of 30% that are the highest performers. And then folks that are kind of woven together with larger affordable housing projects. So all new projects this year are going to be in Tier 2.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And I want to say out loud, because this is quite confusing, a transition grant is different than a transitional housing grant.
Right.
And we are not trying to be confusing on purpose. This is the same language HUD uses. So it's the same language you'll see in the applications and stuff. But a transition grant is when you're taking a renewal grant and making it into a new project type. A transitional housing grant is a specific housing grant type. So I'm sorry that we have to use the same words for that.
Okay, yeah, we're looking at transitioning a PH program into a transitional housing program. So that would be
a transition grant.
Okay.
A transition grant for transitional housing is what it is.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna let Nicole keep going and we can work on other questions.
Sounds good. And all really, really good questions. We know this is really confusing stuff. So yeah, just kind of keeping an eye on time. I'm gonna move forward, and as questions are coming in the chat, we'll have the team to respond to that. And then we definitely have a section to pause for any questions on new project funding. But on the next slide, okay, so first I just want to talk about the eligible populations that can be served for new projects. So HUD's definition of category 1, this is people experiencing literal homelessness. And so how they define that are individuals who their primary like nighttime residence is unsheltered. It's in a place not meant for human habitation. It could be in shelter, transitional housing, or a hotel or a motel that's paid by a charitable organization. So that's category 1 of homelessness. That's literal homelessness. Category 2 is imminent risk of homelessness. So they are going to be losing their housing in 14 days. And then category 4 are for individuals and households that are fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence. So we wanted to cover the eligibility up top. If you're trying to house folks who are coming from institutional stays, so like they've been incarcerated, there's further eligibility requirements and definitions on what is considered homeless. So that stay in an institution would have to be 90 days or fewer. If they have stayed at the institution for longer, they are not considered homeless by this definition. And then we have some other eligibility requirements where transitional housing projects need to utilize coordinated entry to accept referrals, and then they need to enter their data into the CoC's Homeless Management Information System database. And so we have an asterisk there just to know yeah, so you have to use coordinated entry for referrals. We do have the asterisks on the HMIS point for victim service providers because they can use a comparable VSP database. And sorry, so I know I said we would try and be mindful of the acronyms. So DV, domestic violence, I said VSP, that's a victim service provider, and then CA is coordinated access or entry. Yeah, Andrea, is there a specific question just on eligibility?
Yeah, my question is on the transitional housing projects that they're required to use the coordinated entry, but is that exclusively coordinated entry referrals, or would you be able to use other referral sources also?
So it's exclusively coordinated entry referrals for the transitional housing project. There are cases, and Aaron and Brittany should interrupt me if I'm wrong, if you are leveraging other funding for the transitional housing project that requires that you accept referrals from another source, that's something for us to talk about to see if that can be integrated within coordinated entry, but the requirement is still that 100% of referrals for beds come from coordinated entry or coordinated access, I think it's called in this community.
And then Maddie, this is Tony from 4D. I'm with Andre.
Oh, sorry. Should we let Aaron interrupt quick, Tony's,
Oh.
because maybe I said something wrong.
Oh no, I'll go after Tony. That's okay. Go
Okay,
ahead.
sorry. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, my question is that a Multnomah County requirement or is that a HUD requirement?
That's a HUD requirement, and that's been consistent. There was no change in this competition year.
And then for coordinated entry and access, is there a different definition of that? Because what I'm thinking is that, you know, moving people towards transitional recovery housing, right? That's a certain population that's going to do well there versus just, hey, you're next on the list, you go to the next place, which can cause some untherapeutic environments to occur. And then that coupled with this street outreach, it seems like it could sort of clog up the system when you find somebody who's like, let's just say like, hey, I want to go to detox and in residential, but I need a place to go afterwards. Like, okay, we can set you up for this transitional housing. Let's get you through your acute care needs first, right? Like somewhere there will there be flexibility for that sort of coordination to make sure people are getting to the right place that meets their desires and behavioral health needs.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I think yes. And I also just want to say it's a really good question, and there's going to be a lot more conversation about this after we see what gets funded through
Gotcha.
the NOFA, but or the NOFO. But I will just say up front, like Multnomah County HSD understands that if we all of a sudden have a bunch of transitional housing that is required to take referrals through coordinated access, we're going to have to adjust our coordinated access process to
Gotcha.
work for transitional housing. So I just want to know, I want you to know we're committed to figuring that out with you. And what you're describing, yes, we want to have a system where we make sure people get to the right place.
Gotcha.
And we have worked creatively with recovery oriented transitional housing programs in the past to like figure out what that looks like. So we have some experience.
Okay, thank you.
Andrea did. Oh, go ahead. Oh, you're muted, Andrea. Oh, okay. Did you want to ask a question? Okay. Carrie, did you want to ask a question?
This is kind of a comment. So, as far as kind of what's being discussed here, and this is kind of for Aaron as well. So, my experience with CoC and HUD in Washington County in my previous position, kind of a workaround as far as needing to use the coordinated access system is making it so that the way that you start a program is you have someone complete like what would be our missed assessment here, and then the programs actually refer to themselves for that connection, and that's kind of the workaround. So I just want to let you know that that has been accepted in the past in other counties. So that is just something to keep in mind. Not saying that we have to do that, but I can always provide more information if we need this kind of creativity. So.
Thanks. Okay. So we're now going to cover the eligible new project types in more detail, which are transitional housing and then supportive services only for street outreach, and we'll go one by one with those. So as Maddie kind of previewed, transitional housing is time-limited housing. So it can be up to 24 months, and this can be site-based or transition in place. So for site-based, this often looks like the building is owned or leased by a service provider. And then for transition in place, this is scattered site, or it could even look like a single family home that's leased on a unit by unit basis. And so for transition in place, at the end of the program duration, the resident would take over the lease and rent payments, but like they can stay within that unit. So that's the difference between site-based, where at the end of the 24 months, and sorry if I said hours, by the end of the 24 months, they would then be expected to move out. And then with transition in place, they get to maintain that unit after they take on the rent. And then eligible costs look, yeah, go ahead, Maria.
I'm sorry, I did not mean to stop you there. This transition in place piece, I've asked this already, but I just want to make sure I am on the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Would this mean then, unless you had like a facility where you're kind of operating like an old school transitional housing program, but if we did scattered site transitional housing, in essence, it's essentially no different than our existing rapid rehousing programming, right? In terms of allowability. And really what looks to be changing is more so the supportive service component or mandating of such. Would that seem accurate? I just want to make sure, because it's like, it's very scary to think about changing scopes of work, but then when you really kind of look at it, maybe it's not so different. So I think that would just be helpful to know.
Yeah, I would definitely say and then definitely Maddie or Erin, Brittany, feel free to chime in. But at least from my perspective, like particularly with rapid rehousing projects, there is quite a lot of comparability because, yeah, like the rapid rehousing projects could transition to transition in place. It's time limited, and then this like service piece is going to look different, but a lot of the other components will stay the same.
Yeah, my impression so far, and again, like CoC funded transitional housing is pretty new to our team, is that one of the major differences is like the rent payment structure, like participant contributions to rent, but a lot of the other pieces look the same to us so far. So,
Which we might be getting into that, so I'm sorry, let me know. But transitional housing would allow for the program to pay full rent, correct?
I think it's 30% adjusted income or no rent.
As in no rent charge to a participant, correct? Okay, yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so there's a little more flexibility than like traditional rapid rehousing where you're seeing that step down, because you could choose this. Yeah, okay. I do definitely want to answer raised hands, but also please know like your questions might be answered in upcoming slides. But yeah, Natasha, did you have like a clarifying question on the slide before this?
Was just wondering, you had said that the agency would take over the lease. For the transition in place model, could the lease continue in the tenant's name, but we just take over rent payments for that
Yeah.
transitional housing period? Okay, thank you.
Okay. So all housing projects need to offer housing assistance. So this is, the subsidy, the unit, case management. So this is a person or team to help identify needs, create that individualized service plan that identifies goals and then connects the participants to resources to meet those goals and needs, and then other services and resources. So this can look like a combination of services that are provided on site or connections that are being made to community partners and referrals. Okay, so now we're going to get into some more details that are new to this year's competition. So HUD has put out a set of threshold factors and a project, so any project that you put forward needs to score a minimum of 7 out of these 10 points to even be eligible for the funding. So we'll go through the criteria one by one. So the first one is demonstrating that your project is going to be able to provide either directly or partner with other organizations to provide eligible supportive services that would be necessary to assist the participant to obtain and maintain housing. So that's unexpected. Like, I think that's pretty expected and standard, but that would be worth 2 points that you're able to demonstrate, again, how you're providing it either in-house or making those connections to other organizations. The next criteria is that you have prior experience operating transitional housing or other projects that are comparable and have successfully helped people exit homelessness within 24 months. So they really are looking for past performance or experience with being able to support participants in a time limited fashion to exit homelessness. So that's worth 1 point. The next criteria is previously operating or currently operating transitional housing or another homeless project that has a plan in place to ensure. So this year's NOFO has a big emphasis on employment income. So at least 50% of participants would need to exit with employment income. So have you previously operated a project that shows comparable results, or do you have a plan in place to ensure that within 24 months, at least 50% of participants are going to exit with employment income? So that's worth 1 point. And then the final point on this slide is that the project would supplement with resources from other public or private sources. So, this can include mainstream health, social and employment programs such as Medicare, Medicaid, SSI, and SNAP. So this is also something that's been incentivized and prioritized in other competitions. So hopefully not too new or surprising on that end, but those are okay. Here there are there's new language here, so and new criteria. So for 2 points, you'd need to demonstrate that the proposed project will require program participants to take part in supportive services, and you need to attach a supportive service agreement. So that could be attached in an occupancy agreement or a lease. So this service participation requirement is new, and there's 2 points to dedicated to that within this like 10-point threshold factor. And we'll talk about what the service participation requirements can look like in further slides because I imagine there might be questions on that. And then there's 2 points attached to demonstrating that the project will provide up to 40 hours per week of customized services for each participant. So we're not envisioning or interpreting this as meaning 40 hours per week of one-on-one case management, but it is 40 hours per week of customized services. Again, we'll talk about this in a few slides on what this could look like. And those 40 hours per week could be reduced, will be reduced proportionally for participants who are employed. And the 40-hour per week requirement also doesn't apply to participants over the age of 62 or who have a physical disability or impairment, but they are excluding substance use disorder from that in their definition. And then finally, the last threshold factor is demonstrating the average cost per household served for the project is reasonable and consistent with 2 CFR 200-404. So they're looking at cost effectiveness and that the cost per household are not looking inordinate and that they're reasonable. Okay, so I'm gonna just go forward because I imagine some of the questions might be addressed in some of the upcoming slides where we speak to some of that newer language in more detail. But now I'm going to pivot to street outreach. So the goal for street outreach is really to engage people experiencing unsheltered homelessness and support them in resolving their housing crisis as quickly as possible. So what street outreach could look like is, and should look like, is addressing the individual's immediate needs. You could assess for behavioral health and primary health concerns. And then housing connections. So that could look like family reconnection. It could look like connections to mainstream benefits, workforce development, so that they're able to increase their income and self-resolve homelessness. It could look like short-term targeted assistance, deposits, legal assistance to help resolve barriers to housing. So those are things within the category or bucket of street outreach. And then on the next slide, we'll see that there are some different threshold factors for street outreach. So here, a project that puts forward a street outreach proposal, you'd need to score 5 out of 6 points to be eligible for funding. So the first one is the same kind of language as I covered for transitional housing about supplementing resources with other public and private sources and mainstream programs. The second threshold factor here is that the proposed project has a strategy for providing supportive services to eligible program participants, especially so the focus here is that you have a strategy to engage folks with histories of unsheltered homelessness and those who do not traditionally engage with supportive services. And then this is unique language to street outreach. But there's one point if you're able to demonstrate that you have a history of partnering with first responders and law enforcement to engage people living in places not meant for human habitation to access emergency shelter, treatment programs, reunification with family, transitional housing, or independent living. And the applicant also must demonstrate, and demonstrate cooperation, assistance, and that you have not interfered or will not interfere or impede with law enforcement to enforce local laws if there's like public camping bans or public drug use laws. So this law enforcement partnership and coordination piece is unique and new to street outreach, and definitely recognize there are a lot of concerns with this language. And so when you're applying, we can definitely talk through and kind of support around how you might be able to speak to that. Allison?
Thanks. I have a question about the first threshold factor around supplemental resources. So, is this specifically getting at an organization connecting a participant to, like, say, getting enrolled in Medicaid, helping them apply for disability benefits? That's not actual, like, I just want to clarify that that's not match funding they're requesting, but rather we're connecting folks to those resources.
Yeah, not looking for specific match funding, but more so, the former.
Thank you.
And Giovanni?
I just have a quick question. Back, it did say that you could help with, I think it was on the previous slide, sorry. Like you could help with first month's rent, right? If you were doing something.
Oh, for street outreach?
I mean, yeah, you could help with the deposit. It was an example. Do you know if that also includes like first month's rent and moving costs? Because we've helped people short term where I just got a job. I just need the deposit and first month's rent and then I'm fine. Do you know if that would be acceptable?
If first month's rent would be acceptable?
Yeah.
Yeah, let me just look into the specific language so I don't misspeak on that one. And then I'll answer in the chat, follow up on that one. That's a good question.
Okay. I mean, it does say short-term
Yeah.
targeted assistance like deposit, so I would
Yeah, I just
assume
want to
that
see if there's
moving
more
their
specific
belongings from
language.
storage. Yeah, like moving their stuff from storage to a new place. First month's rent and deposit I would hope be
Yeah,
included.
so I'll look at the current language, but it might also just be that right now we don't have like in the NOFO, it was pretty vague, their language around street outreach. So this might be as more things hopefully soon are published by HUD, we might have more clarity for the street outreach projects on what exactly that entails or covers.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? And then, so the final two threshold factors, here we have 1 point for experience providing outreach services and demonstrated effectiveness at helping people successfully exit from places not meant for human habitation to, shelter, treatment programs, transitional housing, or permanent housing programs. And then similar to the transitional housing threshold factor, we again have that services provided are cost effective for 1 point. So again, you need to score 5 out of 6 points to be eligible for funding for a street outreach program. Okay, so I want to spend just like a couple of minutes talking about the service participation NOFO requirements. So this is, again, new language, and we see the focus or emphasis on this in 2 places within the NOFO. So 25% of a new project's total score has to come from performance on returns to homelessness, employment income, and service participation requirements. So they have that 25% like score piece. And then as we saw, one of the threshold requirements for new projects, it's 2 points, is demonstrating that a proposed project will provide 40 hours per week of customized services for each participant. On the next slide,
I'm sorry. Can you just clarify the verbiage of that says 40 hours per week for each participant. I know it doesn't mean literally each person, each individual person gets 40 hours of someone's time.
Yes, not. Go ahead, Maddie.
No, it doesn't legit. It's not 40 hours of case management, but it is 40 hours of services per person per week. So it is a huge kind of services request this year that is new. So we're not exactly sure what it's going to look like. Nicole, do you have more stuff you want to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so again, like it's not one-on-one case management, but these like every participant needs to be able to engage in 40 hours. So that could look like a classroom setting where you're having workshops. That's not to say like it's still a huge, huge ask and lift, but you would have a classroom setting where workshops are being held Monday to Friday from 8 to 4, where people can drop in and attend those workshops, or you have a computer lab that folks can come in and then engage in employment search or things that would then add up to 40 hours. So not one-on-one case management, that's specific, or like one-on-one classes. They could be available in group settings, but every individual would then have to be able to fill up 40 hours. Erin, and then I see, yeah, if you want to add any
Oh my God. Well, yeah, that's crazy. That's like having folks who are homeless have a full-time job pretty much. And then we have to have the staff or the resources to provide those service. And I'm sorry, just one more question. We need to provide those, or can it be like, hey, I'm going to help sign you up for substance use classes, or you got
that's
to
a
go there
great
2
question.
hours a week? Like, is it something we have to provide, or
No.
that we can like help them fill their full-time jobs with other services?
Yes, the latter. So absolutely, I want to affirm like the ask is out of touch. It's unrealistic. It would require a huge lift even on a staffing capacity perspective. But yeah, Giovanni, to your point, it doesn't all have to be on-site direct service provision. It can be connections to other like community resources or things online.
And you're sure that doesn't say 20 hours? Because that is crazy. Thank you.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm very sure it's 40.
Yeah, I just want to jump in. So, this is definitely something that across the country, communities are not sure. Like, this isn't feasible for, I think, like essentially anyone if you interpret it really black and white. But I think this is a place where, and please, Maddie and Nicole, jump in if I say anything that doesn't feel right to you. But I feel like this is a place where we really lean in to this is the first time HUD has ever put this out there. I don't think HUD knows what they mean by this, to be totally honest. I don't think they have any idea how they would monitor for this. And I think we really lean into an interpretation, a broad interpretation that we can make work for our programs. So I'm thinking this could be something like, here are a bunch of different services that you can engage in. It's not saying that participants have to engage in 40. I don't think that's not how I read it, that participants have to engage in 40 hours a week, but you have to be able to offer 40 hours a week of services. Participants have to engage in services, but not 40 hours a week of services. That's how much you have to be able to offer. So I think this is where like we get creative with all of our programs to be like, what does it mean to be like provide a list of service options for people, not just through your organization, but through the whole network, that folks can like opt into, that we are able to demonstrate adds up to 40 hours a week. And it includes clinical services. It could include employment services. It could include, I think, probably childcare and child-facing services. Like I think we should interpret it as broadly as we can. So that's just.
I couldn't even fill my whole week with 40 hours of stuff that's not a job. This is insane. Just
Yeah,
for the record.
definitely.
I think Maddie, do you want to go first, and then I can just add my stuff after?
Yeah, so somebody, Perla in the chat had said, but the language also says they have to participate in services. And I think that this is another place where things are very new and we lean into kind of a larger, vaguer interpretation of what it means to participate in services. So just because somebody has to participate in services and that's a program requirement does not mean that somebody is evicted for not participating in a case management meeting, right? So there are kind of a lot of lines to walk here of like required participation in services, having a really robust kind of offering of supportive services for different clients, but also recognizing that I agree with Erin, HUD doesn't know what they wrote here. They don't know how they're going to monitor for it, what it means. And so I think that there will be more information coming out about this in the coming weeks. Nicole?
Yeah, I was gonna say I definitely understand that there's a lot of comments in the chat and questions coming up around this because this is one of the among the many new things that have come out. I think one piece that everyone is just like, what does this even mean? How would this be implemented? How would this be monitored? So many questions. But definitely echo what Erin and Maddie said around being like this is really are an area for us to try and be creative for this to still like as much as possible for us to have fall back on strong practices around having there be a lot of variety and have it be individualized for folks so that it truly can be customized. And yeah, it is like what kind of really diversifying that offering so that there is on top of case management some on-site stuff we are going to have to leverage like community partnerships and think about that creatively. I think someone popped in the chat, and I've seen other providers think about can they have different sorts of like worksheets that they can have estimated times with for like if you complete this that's you actively like working toward your goals like if we have a computer lab that is open for folks and folks can come in like they can do their job search and that is an estimated like time allotment so I think it's regardless yeah 40 hours is a lot but there are ways to be creative hopefully to make this a slightly more feasible and then I think that piece about really having um, streamlined and clear documentation so that because those 2 points about the 40 hours per week may be reduced proportionally for participants who are employed, really important to have that documented so that could be dropped. And then having that clear documentation for folks who are 62 or who have a physical disability, having that all in order so that those qualifications can be applied and adjusted. Um, okay, next slide, please. I think for the sake of time.
Can I
So,
just ask a question on that? Who tracks the 40 hours might make a big difference in this. Is it the client or are we required to track on behalf of the client? Because I think if it's the client, there are a bunch of government programs that have similar requirements, not ours, but like if you're applying for unemployment, they ask that.
Yeah. So let me just jump in. So it's the proposed project will provide 40 hours per week of services for each participant. So you'll just have my interpretation of it right now, and again, this is a new requirement, is that the project will have to demonstrate that you offered 40 hours per week per participant. So there's no kind of client tracking on that side. And yeah, this is for transitional housing. This is not for outreach.
okay, I have two more slides, so I'm gonna go through those, and then we have space because I recognize there are more raised hands for questions. So I'm just gonna cover the two, and then Giovanni, Maria, and Yaya, we will come to you. So I think I've already started touching on like this doesn't have to be it's not possible for it to be the 40 hours just one-on-one case management. So service participation really could cover various categories. So this slide covers some examples of that. With skill development, this could look like teaching practical skills. So, we've seen again, kind of one of those activities being like if someone's couponing, like how many hours could that take? support around budgeting, cooking, job readiness, social skills development, so helping participants just in their like confidence and ability to interact with others, building relationships. So we see like a lot of that in some projects that are a little more like a serious mental illness focus. In a clubhouse model, we see a lot of like a social skills development focus there. Supportive counseling. This could look like providing support and guidance to help individuals cope with any mental health challenges they're facing, goal setting. We've talked about. And then community integration could look like encouraging participation in community activities and resources so that they can foster a sense of belonging and support in their larger community. And there could be group activities. So it does not have to be all like one-on-one course offerings or activity offerings. And then I think my last slide, so the funding options for new project types within the CoC bonus, you could apply for transitional housing or street outreach. And then for the DV bonus, it's transitional housing only is the new project type that you could apply for. And then I think our next slide is for questions, right? So yeah, what questions do you have about the new requirements, and have your organizations been thinking about these changes? And if so, how so? So I think I think there was Maria, there was Giovanni, Laura, Yaya, Jose. Okay, I'm gonna go in this order. Maria?
I have two questions, I guess. One is from that previous slide, the kind of options. For DV bonuses, is supportive services only not an option for
It's
even
not.
new projects? Okay.
Yeah, so for DV bonus, we're only looking for transitional housing for Multnomah. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then going back to the previous slide, I just want to actually, this one and the previous one, I just want to say, like, that list of services that you ran through is like what we do already. And I'll just echo it as it's written, or at least as it reads in face value. This is literally impossible. Even coordinating 40 hours of services, there's not even enough time to do that, let alone update your client file and do all the other like administrative work. And so I guess I'm just curious, TAs on this call, what you think, what you expect to see from our applications. Do you expect to see twos in there because of how just kind of unclear it all feels? Or like, do we read it at face value and say, this is border, again, to me, it feels impossible. I think that there's a lot of graying that we can do of the equation, but I'm just hyper aware of the fact that DV projects already are contending with 8 maximum points because of the mandating of services. And so I struggle to think that if I read this at face value and we don't get those 2 points, we're straight up just not eligible to transition to TH, meaning we would have, 6 points total if we get all the other points, let's say.
Yeah, I want to take an attempt, and then Maddie and Nicole, please jump in. But I think this is where I'm like, personally, I think that it's a concern that literally every CoC provider across the country is trying to grapple with. I don't think anyone has the answer to this, which means I think we have to lean in to a really broad interpretation of it, because I don't think it's possible for the vast majority of providers. And so I would expect like programs to be thinking about how can we, between the services we offer in-house and services in the community, how can we put together kind of a menu of services that add up to 40 hours per week potentially for folks? And like, I just don't expect HUD to be very, like, at least anytime soon, to get more directive about like exactly what they expect to see or how organizations have to prove it, because I don't think HUD knows. So that's like I just think this feels to me like an area where we as a community do the best we can, and just like remember that we're alongside every other community who's struggling with the same thing, and there's not really this doesn't make sense. So I think it's okay to acknowledge that and then do the best we can to demonstrate the through a broad interpretation to how we're doing it.
Is it safe to assume, Erin, that you do expect to see twos responses to this? And I know that's a kind of weird question. I'm just trying to get a sense of like, to me, this feels unfeasible for all of us on the call. And so then, like, what is the community's approach to, in trying to kind of decipher this as best as possible to give our best? Yeah, I don't know what I'm saying. I guess I'll stop there. I'm struggling with this one, as you can tell.
Yeah, no, and I know a lot of folks are. I don't think we're going to be able to like answer exactly what you're asking. Like, I don't know how HUD's gonna. I don't know if it's just going to be a checkbox from HUD in the application or if there's going to be more. So I think we have to wait and see, and just know that like county staff are like prepared to support providers and getting flexible or getting creative with how we provide. Yeah, I see a lot of hands. I'll stop talking.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Laura, do you want to go next?
Hi, yeah, thank you. So you guys defined homelessness, and the federal definition of homelessness states exiting an institution where you've been for 90 days or less. So if someone is coming from inpatient residential treatment where they've been for more than 90 days, would they not qualify for these programs?
Yeah, that's correct. So you have to be literally homeless at the time of entry into the program, which means if they are coming straight out of a stay in an institution that's longer than 90 days, they no longer are considered literally homeless under the HUD definition.
So
if they spent one night outside or one night in a shelter after they exited, then yes, they are literally homeless again. But at the time of exit, they're not homeless.
So that was my workaround question. They have to spend one night being literally homeless.
Yeah.
And then
because
and then for the coordinated access, are people allowed to get on the coordinated access if they're in residential treatment? I haven't worked with coordinated access before as a referral source.
I think it might be hard to say just yes or no, but I think generally like yes, and it might depend on the kind of residential treatment program it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, okay. That answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I have a couple of questions. One thing around entering data into the homeless management. Some of the folks that we serve are asylum seekers, and there's always just concern about entering any sort of data into for those. And as you were going through this, I didn't see anything about requirements. The requirements would they have to be homeless. It didn't say anything about immigration status or anything. Can you speak to that? And then the other question was around the domestic violence stuff. We're thinking about getting into some of that. We have I don't really have any experience with it, and so what is that bonus and how does it work? And then the last question is similar to what other people are asking. When they ask about 40 hours a week, if we have, for instance, a class and the class requires homework, does that homework count towards the 40 hours?
Okay, so part one was about immigration status. So historically, the way that has worked for the Continuum of Care program is that nonprofit agencies receiving Continuum of Care funding do not need to verify immigration status as long as they don't verify immigration status for anybody in the program. So you just cannot collect information about citizenship status from anybody. That's only true for nonprofit programs. That's not true for local government programs. So kind of hold that to be true. We are seeing though that like kind of HUD and ICE have data sharing agreements now. There are kind of increasing indications that HUD is trying to kind of close close that and make it so that only folks with a citizen, like with full citizenship, can receive continuum of care funding. So while that is still the rule, is my understanding, that is something that's sort of been rapidly evolving this year. And there is like new preference points in this application, for example, for communities that close that hole. So I think that was your first question. Um, your second question was about how domestic violence bonus funds work. I think historically, we have tried to make it so that victims, like qualified victim services providers, are the folks that are applying for the domestic violence bonus funding. So if your agency does not have experience serving that population and you're not a qualified victim services provider, we ask that you reach out to us so that we can kind of figure out what a good next step is there to make sure that you're qualified and that you understand kind of all the requirements, because there are extra requirements for projects that serve folks with experience of domestic violence. And then I think I lost the third question.
Yeah,
The homework question?
yeah, the question was, if we're talking about 40 hours a week and I have a class where people take homework home, does that homework count towards that 40 hours a week for folks?
Yeah, no idea. So again, we don't really have a lot of specifics about how the 40 hours a week is going to be monitored, what the requirements are around it. The information we presented today is the information that's available to us right now about how it's going to work. So I think a broad interpretation of what 40 hours of services looks like is the direction that we're leaning. So if your organization thinks, yes, that should be included in 40 hours in your estimates of how much those class times cost, then are like how much time they are, then I would think that that's a way to move forward. So no clear guidance from HUD or from our team about what that means, because we just really don't know.
And who do I reach out to about the DB stuff or any other questions?
Yeah, maybe Nicole can put our email in the chat, and we're going to follow up with an email today too. So other questions that didn't get answered today, we're hoping can get sent to us. I know we have a lot of questions left. We also only have about 17 minutes. And so I think we can take 1 to 2 more questions. I encourage people to keep putting things in the chat. And if we haven't answered it today, we're going to follow up with you over email. And you can also follow up with us over email. So the last question we're going to take right now is from Laura. Laura, do you want to come off mute?
I'm sorry, I already asked my question. I'll lower my hand.
Okay. Jose Luis?
Yeah, so my question is, I put it on the chat and somebody answered it, but I had a clarifying question. So when it comes to acquisition and capital investment to purchase a property, in the answer it said is not the best way to use these funds. But with my experience, when you purchase a home, then it reduces the amount of monthly rent that you have to pay. So it becomes more like a in long term, it becomes less of a burden. In this, is it preferable to rent because rent is really high right now? Like if
So
we want to go to expand and get a new home, or purchase a home.
yeah, so the reason that we would encourage folks to not seek out acquisition funding, even though it is an eligible cost for transitional housing, is that acquisition funds are a one-time fund that you can get from continuum of care funding. And the rest of this funding is renewable funding that we can get year over year as a community. So when we use some of our funding to get acquisition funds, it doesn't actually add to the pot of available money for this community year over year. It's just like a one time we're taking it out of the pot and then it's forever gone. Whereas if you do rental assistance funding or leasing funding, that is a renewable cost year over year. And so the available money in the community continues to grow. I think you have some really valid points about renting versus home ownership. And if folks have really strong acquisition projects, we encourage you to reach out so we can talk more about it. But in general, like I said, because of that renewable versus non-renewable element, acquisition funding is not usually like the most strategic use of continuum of care funding. This is a much better source of funding for like rental
So,
assistance and leasing.
so what we're trying to do is not impact the entire pot when you do acquisition, right? It impacts the entire renewal funding throughout the years. Does that make sense? Now I just want to add something to people that are worried about the 40 hours. If you do transitional housing, you know that like we do recovery transitional housing. Off the bat, we're already doing 40 hours a week required for people living in our homes. And that's like at a minimum because treatment tends to be about 10 hours a week. We require people to do meetings, and those are about 6 hours a week. Then we're required to do individual service plans with the case managers. That's another, 4 to 5 hours a week. So it builds up pretty fast. And people to come to transitional housing with that mindset already know that they have to be involved. So I just wanted to say that because I hear people that are worried, and I understand that a lot of people here are doing more like permanent housing, and I feel bad that not bad, it's horrible that we're losing these services because then us as transitional housing, we utilize your services for more long-term housing. And if they're gone, then our community is going to hurt either way. So, but I wanted to kind of maybe put at ease that 40 hours can easily be attained outside of the program. You don't really have to do them all yourself.
Thank you. I'm gonna just roll us through the last couple slides here so folks understand the requirements for applying for this funding because we have a quick timeline here. Everyone's welcome to keep their hands up. And I know that for our team, we can stick around for another couple minutes after the end of the session to answer additional questions that are coming up. But I want to make sure everybody can get the information that they need. So like I said at the beginning, this is a two-part funding competition process. So there is a local competition and then there is a national competition. The local competition, you have to submit a local application for your new project. And then it will be reviewed and ranked by a panel, and we will create that priority, that list of projects in order of how the community would like to see them funded. Then once that has been completed, you also have to submit an application to HUD, the eSNAPS application, a separate application. There are some things that are in common, but there are some things that are different. The CoC will then submit that priority listing that we created to HUD, and then HUD ultimately decides who to fund, honoring that priority list order. So there will be two applications you're asked to complete, a local application and an eSNAPS application. Before you apply, it's important that you note these things. You must be a nonprofit or a local government entity to apply for this funding. Faith-based organizations are welcome to apply. Tribal governments are welcome to apply as well. But in general, most of our applicants tend to be nonprofit or local government entities. You must have an active SAM.gov registration as well as an active SAM.gov unique entity identifier. These are things you likely have if you've received federal funding before, and we have instructions for folks who need to sign up for those things. You also will need to sign up for eSNAPS, which is the HUD application portal for their application as well. We have instructions for that as well if that's new to you. We had some conversation in the chat about compliant codes of conduct. We have instructions for that, but you need to have a compliant code of conduct. And then you will also be required to get match commitments. And we can talk about that a little bit more as well. But these are all requirements for applicants for continuum of care funding. This is also a funding source that can be quite complicated to administer because as we've kind of gotten into today, there's a lot of federal requirements. So this is just a list of different things that are expected, especially from housing projects, so transitional housing projects especially. You'll have to have written policies and procedures. You'll have to be verifying participant eligibility. You need fiscal controls and accounting procedures. You'll have to track your match contributions and expenditure documentation. You'll do environmental reviews. There'll be housing inspections. There's different rent limits and ways to do that, like we talked about. And you also have to monitor program performance. So I say this not because you should memorize this list of things right now or be able to say, oh, we can check off all these boxes. But just as you're getting into this funding, know that this is a federal grant and it can be quite difficult to administer. So if you are a small organization or an organization new to big kind of government funding, just kind of be aware that there are a lot of requirements around this work. So the way that the local process will work is folks will submit, again, a local application, and then there is a group that will meet to review your application, and then they will create the priority listing, and then you will submit your eSNAPS applications to HUD, like we talked about before. So the things that will be looked at when scoring your new project application locally, it will look at if you can meet those HUD threshold factors for transitional housing or street outreach, depending on what type of project you apply to. And we talked about those threshold factors. Those were those boxes. It includes the 40 hours of services available for transitional housing. They'll also look at your proposed program design, your expected outcomes. If you are willing to make services participation a requirement for transitional housing projects, they'll also look at if you can provide on-site substance use treatment or healthcare or non-CoC leverage. So healthcare leverage looks like you can match 25% of the total amount that you're requesting with additional healthcare dollars. And then non-CoC leverage is that same thing, but for housing dollars from outside the continuum of care. And then you'll also be asked to submit a budget, and we have a budget template available for folks. And that is something else that the group will look at to determine the score for your new project. So like I mentioned, we have a couple of pre-application resources available to folks, and this will go out in the email that we send after today. So we have a competition webpage that's going to have the pre-application on it. You can find separate pre-applications for CoC bonus funds, continuum of care bonus funds, as well as DV bonus funds. So there's 2 applications for those project types. There's also some distinctions in there. You'll be able, as you read through, to see which questions you answer if you're applying for a transitional housing project versus which questions you answer if you're applying for straight outreach. So that's for the local application. And then there's also the eSNAPS application. We have resources available for how to access that and sign up for eSNAPS and start your project applicant profile. The bad news is that HUD hasn't put out the eSNAPS applications yet, so they are not available to start filling out, but you can work on getting access to eSNAPS if that's something you don't already have. And we are happy to help you get connected to that. And we anticipate we'll have another kind of all applicant meeting once the eSNAPS application's out, so we can help people work through that. And there's a lot of resources available to help fill out the eSNAPS applications. We'll have project guidance, and our team is experts on eSNAPS, so we'll be able to figure it out with you. But just for now, they have not released the application yet, so it will be difficult to get started. So for next steps, please watch out for a follow-up email that includes the materials that we went through today, and you can reach out to us with any questions. And then we have some key upcoming dates here. So we're going to hold a whole bunch of project office hours, and we'll send out the links to those. And those will be hour-long sessions over the next 2 weeks where we can continue to dive into a lot of the questions that came up today and other ones that are going to come up as you get into it. And we are asking that all projects submit a new project letter of intent by December 3rd. So that's next Wednesday. We know that's fast, but the timeline for this competition period this year is fast. Kind of a key element here is the letter of intent is just going to say, okay, here are the projects we hope to apply for. If that changes between the time the letter of intent is due and when you submit your project application, that is totally okay. But we just want to get a sense of who else is applying and who's in the mix, so we can provide the best support possible to people. And we have a template available for the letter of intent. And then the project applications are going to be due December 12th. So those local project applications are due December 12th. And we will send out more information about the eSNAPs once those applications are available. We have the letter of intent links here, and this is just the same note I said about they're due, but we want to help. So it's okay if information changes. And those were the slides we were hoping to get through today. So I'm happy to move to questions if that is okay with everybody else. The first person I see up is Giovanni.
Yeah, just real quick, mine are quick, I think.
Okay.
For outreach, because that's mainly what we're looking at, it says it's always asking you to prove that you have experience with outreach and doing these things, but it also encourages new folks to apply. So if we have partnered with another organization that was not a nonprofit, could we include that in, yeah, we have this experience because we've partnered with this organization to do this work, and the data that's collected also is like our data.
Yeah, totally. I think if you've partnered with somebody, it doesn't matter what their status is. You're welcome to include those types of experiences in your local project application. The things about like nonprofit eligibility are really only when we're talking about applying for this funding. So any past experiences or stuff you want to talk about is super wide open.
Okay. So and that was the second part. So we can partner with for-profit organizations. So you answered that, and that was it for me. Thank you.
You can't, sorry, when you're applying for the funds, you can't partner with for-profit organizations.
No, but like if in my proposal, it's like one of our community partners is, but they're
Yeah.
not a nonprofit. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you can partner with lots of different people. It's more who ends up on the application as recipients of funding. And the recipients of funding must be nonprofits or local governments or tribes or faith-based organizations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Stephen, you've been very patient. Thank you. Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
When I tried to open the PDF application, I get this page that says error message, big number 404, website not available.
I can answer that one.
Okay.
It should be fixed by the end of the day. We're just still working to update the links on our website.
Okay, so I wouldn't know if it's something on my end that.
It's not something on your end, no.
Okay. The other question is the letter of intent. We're looking at doing a transition project, transition from a permanent housing to transitional housing. Does that go on the letter of intent?
Yeah, so there are two versions of the letter of intent. There's one for folks sorry for the balloons, it does that sometimes. There's one for folks who are currently receiving CoC funding, and then there's one for folks who are not. So if you currently have a program, please fill out the one that says we currently receive CoC funding, because in there it will say, here are our current grants, here's our plan for our current grants, and then we want to apply for new funding as well.
Okay, all right. I wasn't sure if that fit in new funding or renewal or what the category was.
Yeah, we have slightly different names for them for the letter of intent for this reason exactly. So it should be, I'm hopeful it's pretty clear, but there's a letter of intent for providers who are current recipients of CoC funding and for providers who are not current recipients of CoC funding. And the reason we're doing that is not we want to get a sense of how all the money's moving around so we can apply for as much of it as possible this year.
And then if we were looking at a support service only or outreach project, that would go on the letter of intent as well.
Yeah, any new project you're applying for, please put it on the letter of intent.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Can I, before we go
ahead,
to the next question, I know some folks are going to start hopping off soon, so I just wanted to take a moment and then I think we can stay on for folks who are able to answer the final questions. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you so much for being here today, the day before a holiday. This is a really, really intense process. I have been getting really emotional about it over the last month. I know a lot of other people have. It's going to have a huge impact on our community, and I just really want to center that and say we're in this together. We are here to support you, and we also need to get applications from you so that we can put them forward to HUD and do the best we can to get as many federal dollars come to our community as possible, because we need those dollars to serve folks in our community. So I just really want to appreciate you for jumping into this really chaotic, messy process with us and reassure you that we're here to support you and answer your questions to the best of our ability. And that also to reassure you that I don't think any community across the country knows the answers to a lot of the questions you all asked today. So we're just going to do our best as a community to put the best application we can forward. And then we're also going to pursue other strategies outside of that, like what other funding sources can we bring to the table to protect programming that's going to be impacted by CoC funds no longer prioritizing permanent housing in the way that it has in the past. How can we work together to keep as many folks from returning to homelessness who are going to be impacted by these shifts? So we're in this together, and I just want you to know that and to know we're available for follow-up conversations. And if folks need to go, they should. And otherwise, I'm happy to stay around for the next 15 or so to answer questions.
Great. Thank you. I think next up for questions, I see Maria.
Hi, thank you. These are DV specific, so apologies to the group, but we have a supportive services only, like a supportive services only coordinated entry, I believe it is, award. Is that exempt from this entire
So
shenanigans?
it's unfortunately not exempt. It still is going to end up on the priority listing. Right now, the priority listing has the policy has a policy within it where we're assigning they're going to be placed at the bottom of tier one. So
Okay,
HMIS renewal grants and coordinated entry renewal grants, including both the CoC bonus
okay.
and DB bonus version, will be at the bottom of tier one. But the CAKE, the review and rank group, has the
Mm,
discretion to keep it in or remove it. So
okay.
that's how the policy is written.
Awesome, thank you. And then another question is, so the DV bonus bucket right now is about 1.4 million. Is that the DV, is that the same bucket of which all of the new projects that are transitioning from RRH to TH, is that what we're competing out of, or is that a
So
separate bucket?
yeah, the way it will work is so all of the DV projects that were funded by DV bonus funding are rapid rehousing projects, as far as I understand. So they will reallocate their funding and it will get pushed back in the pot. And then the pot
Oh, I
of
see.
DV bonus and the reallocation will be combined and needs to be sucked
Okay,
up by other new DV projects. So it's a much bigger amount. It's all of the current
gotcha.
DV projects plus the DV bonus amount.
So in theory, that DV bonus would be for new projects altogether. Like if we were in a
Yeah.
renewal world. Okay. Now, last question, I promise. TAs, do you recommend communities compete against themselves? Like I fear that if we put in new applications altogether, how that might compete with all the other RRHs that are transitioning over that are showing up as new applications as well. Is there a recommendation there? I don't think
So
our
there, oh,
community
go ahead,
necessarily
Erin.
wants, but oh,
I
sorry, go
was
first.
I was just gonna say it's a really tight timeline between now and December 12th. And I think what we would ask is like put in the applications that you think make sense because we just don't
Okay.
know. So there are going to be organizations, I assume, that decide we just can't make the conversion to transitional housing for lots of really valid reasons. So I
Sure.
think we just want to get as many quality applications as we can so that we can apply for as much of this money as possible. So I would encourage, I don't want to dissuade anyone from putting in totally new project applications. We are very
Sure.
much like inviting those and want those.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura, I see you next.
Thank you. This is a clarifying question. So previously it had stated that you could refer out to substance abuse treatment, but then you had a slide where it said on-site substance abuse treatment with an asterisk. Is that something that Multnomah County is asking for, or is like, can you clarify why there was an asterisk and if you can refer to outside substance abuse treatment or
Yeah, totally. So, there is a new priority for substance use, period. And I think as you're thinking about services connections, the way that you're connecting folks to substance use treatment can be on site or you can be referring people out. So when we hold that
okay.
like sort of services list, that is a separate thing than the slide I'm currently showing, which is one we skipped because we ran out of time. But there is a new priority for projects that are able to offer substance use treatment on site and also have availability of 24/7 detox services. But you have to be able to prove that you can do that through evidence of program policies,
Right.
agreements, letters of commitments, and things like that. So you are able to make referrals out, and that is definitely
Okay.
encouraged as you're doing your services. But there will be like extra points available to programs that can do it on site.
And I'm glad you brought this slide up also because so there's not 24-hour 7 detox services in Multnomah County at this time, right?
Okay.
So that was my other question about this is like can we if we're writing about that, can we say that we refer clients like because currently right now we do refer clients to detox and we know that but at 3 a.m. you can't get anybody into detox services currently.
I think writing about it the way you're describing is good, Laura. And then
Okay,
we're also like the language is taken directly from HUD. We're going to have
I
to
know.
figure out as a community
Right.
how we in our are responding to that But yes, for your application, the way you described it makes total
Okay,
sense to me.
perfect. And thank you guys so much for being like so on top of this.
Thank you. Carrie, I see you have a hand up.
Hi, so I see in the NOFO, I was really hoping you guys were going to cover the new supportive services only non-coordinated entry part. Did I miss that, or is that something that Multnomah County is going to be doing? Because we actually have a program that would probably make sense for using that. So I don't know if this is for Aaron or.
Yeah, you didn't miss it. It was not included in the slides. We maybe Aaron, do you want to answer it first?
I think, Carrie, if you have a creative idea, let's talk. But as of now, we haven't invited applications for what's called the supportive services only standalone project type because it's new and there's a lot of unknowns about it, and it feels risky in certain ways to like try to apply without fully understanding what's allowed. And so we are focusing on transitional housing and strata outreach because those are programs that we understand. But like if I feel like this competition is all about playing a game. And so if you have a really creative idea, I would love to talk to you.
Yes, no, our stabilization readiness program actually might be perfect for this. So yeah, we can talk about this when we meet, but I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. Thank you.
Yeah, you didn't miss anything. If we were unsure about a lot of the stuff we presented today, we're the most unsure about supportive services standalone.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Great. Thank
you. Margaret, I see your hand.
Thank you. And my questions are going to sound kind of weird because we're not a homeless service provider. So forgive me, I'm coming at this from a different language. So we're considering submitting a transitional housing proposal, and we need to find a service provider. We have the real estate that would be appropriate to adapt to this purpose. And there's a long backstory that I don't need to get into. And so my question is really about the strategy about whether Reach would be the best applicant or whether it would actually be the service provider that would be the appropriate applicant. And part of the reason why I'm wrestling with that is, we are a nonprofit 501c3. We have, received federal dollars. I don't know how much the local competition or the HUD competition will look at our experience or lack thereof as a service provider. So that's sort of one sort of piece. The other piece is that ultimately we may want to transfer the ownership of the property to the service provider. So that's something that we're working on with PHB. So it's also that issue about like site control. Again, in the real estate space, it's always what HUD asks about. And so we're technically the owner of the property, but long term, we might be interested if we find the right service provider. Again, if somebody can make this programming work, and hearing from all of you that might be really a tall order. But if we can find someone who's interested in doing this, we might want to actually just hand the keys to the property over to that service provider. And so the ownership might transfer. And so I'm also curious about the site control issue and what I need to know about that. And then I guess the third question is, we don't have, maybe you all understand what your timing would be for the selections that you would send to HUD. We don't know how soon they'll be making decisions, but any insight on timing would be helpful. So who's the lead applicant? What do we do about site control? And what can you tell me about timing, I guess, are my biggest questions.
Yeah, I think part of this is I think we answered some of your questions, not the questions you just asked, but we had responded to your questions this morning. So in case you missed that email, I think your strongest approach would be for you all to have a subrecipient that is a service provider, or the service provider is the recipient and is able to demonstrate site control at the time of contracting. There is quite a few considerations throughout the application around previous experience, and services participation is a real focus this year, both of the local application and the federal application. So I think, unlike some previous years, if you all submitted but you didn't have services attached to it, I just don't think it will be a very successful application. So my understanding of site control, and we can follow up more about this over email, is that site control just needs to be demonstrated at the point of contracting, which would happen at some point next year. And the timeline pieces are definitely way up in the air. This is a way later competition than we usually see for this federal funding source. So we are kind of tentatively telling people to think about contracting happening in the second half of next year, but we really just don't know. There's also like legal action against this particular notice of funding opportunity, which could also further delay or change that timeline. So not very good question, not very good answers to the timeline question.
So we could apply, find a subrecipient, and then lean on the subrecipient's experience. We're demonstrating site control, and then later at the time of contract, if that subrecipient they could become the recipient, that could change. Okay.
Yeah, you can change the recipient later on. You guys could also say the recipient and have a subrecipient service provider for the long term. You would then just be the direct recipient of the funding and pass through to subs. There's lots of different ways to configure, but you definitely need a service provider involved.
Absolutely. And then I saw your answer to my prior question about there's not a formula to use to calculate the funding levels.
No.
So, yeah. But hopefully the right subrecipient will be able to build that budget for us. So, okay.
Exactly.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Christine, I see you up next.
Yeah, so every time I come to one of these every year, your invite again says new CBOs, right? But all of your language, everything you're saying, even your PowerPoints are speaking to people who've done this before. There's never any room for new CBOs to enter into this space because your scoring, your everything is for people who have done this work. You're even saying you got to have experience. We have staff people who have experience doing the work, but as an organization, if you don't have the organization itself doesn't have experience, but the staff has experience from other housing organizations they work for, how can a new CBO enter into this space if there's no space for them?
I could speak a little bit to that. I think when I have said, or my understanding of like when we say new CBOs, what we're really meaning is like organizations that have not previously received continuum of care funding. So we want to make the application really available to organizations that haven't previously gotten this funding. HUD has a lot of requirements around previous experience that the organization has had in doing the kind of work you're applying to do. So it is true that for a brand new organization who's never done this work before, it would be an uphill battle. And also it's not unprecedented. We have supported organizations that are really new to this work to come in and be applicants. And I think you're right to talk about your staff's experience. I think that's totally appropriate to talk. It doesn't have to be your staff's experience at that organization, but you can talk about your team and the expertise your team brings in your application.
Yaya?
All of us, all of our staff, including me as an ED, we all have extensive years of housing, 3.5 years. If our nonprofit itself doesn't have the experience and we keep trying to this space with over 20 years of experience as staff, that's the part that we keep running into.
Yeah, I would encourage you to put an application in if your organization is interested in creating a transitional housing or street outreach program and you have prior experience, and we can work with you to figure out how to become a successful applicant with HUD, hopefully. Obviously, this is honestly also the hardest year to try to come in as a brand new organization who hasn't, as an organization, done this work before. So I want to be honest about that, but we're totally open to applications from organizations that have not previously as an organization.
Yaya?
Yeah, I, I know I already asked this question, but I'm just wondering if I could get some more support. My biggest concern is our name is Afghan Support Network, and where we are starting to provide services to folks outside the Afghan community. I'm concerned if that is just a disqualifier in of itself. Um, and I'm looking at the requirements, and we actually have done a lot of this work already, and meet the requirements at least. And I feel like we can be creative around meeting the 40 hours stuff as well, in a lot of the services that we provide in house. But it's the biggest concern is, hey, are we going to be just auto disqualified because of who we are and what we have done up until now? Um, and then a question kind of similar to what someone just asked was about the supportive services. It looks like there might be funding. Can we ask for in the budget? Can we ask for money to help, like, if there's a gap in that 40 hours for staff funding to do the supportive part of it as well?
So you can, if you are doing transitional housing, you can request supportive services funding. It's one of the eligible costs, so you can request that money to be helping meet that 40-hour requirement. And again, the requirement is not 40 hours of case management per person per week. It's like 40 hours of services more broadly. So I think put forward a services budget that you think would help you all meet that, kind of within the eligible costs in that budget. And there's another resource we can send if you have more questions about what's an eligible supportive services cost. I think for the first question, I don't have any better answer right now than I did a few minutes ago. I just don't know. Like officially, no. Like it is not a disqualifier to have a name that your organization has. That's not something that's written down. And I think if you can verify, you're not going to do illegal discrimination against certain racial groups, then that is what the requirements of the application say. So I think if you all want to put forward a new project application and it feels like a good fit, you definitely should.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Natasha?
I don't know if I missed this somewhere, but I was just wondering if for our kind of like understanding of the big picture, like how much funding we currently receive from HUD for permanent housing projects and what that decrease is looking like overall. Just trying to put this in context so I can kind of go back to our managers with some idea of like what this is looking like in the big picture. So that was one question.
Can we start with that one and then go to your next? So right now, 96% of our annual renewal demand is used for permanent housing, and we need to be able to cut that number to 30% of the current annual renewal demand. So we could get you the specific numbers for that because I can't do them off my head, but like the annual renewal demand this year is 36.1 million. So we can only do 30% of that as permanent housing. Whereas 36 million is how much it essentially costs to refund all the permanent housing minus a few $100,000. Oh, wait, I can do it quick off the top of my head. It's 10 million. 10.8 million is the difference. So we're going from 36 million to 10.8.
Okay. Great. And then for projects that did want to apply for more permanent housing proposals, that's not included in this NOFA. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there is not an option to apply for new permanent housing. So new permanent supportive housing, new rapid rehousing, or new joint transitional housing or rapid rehousing. None of those are options for this year because we do have that 30% cap on permanent housing that HUD will make, and the CoC has made a decision to prioritize renewal permanent supportive housing for that amount.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
No problem. Do folks have other questions? I know we are about 20 minutes over, so we can also wrap up and answer more questions next week at the office hours sessions or over email. So any last things folks want to ask right now?
Let's wrap up.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for coming, and definitely be in contact. Sorry, Erin, you wrap up.
Oh, no. Same things. Be in contact. I was also just going to say, Nicole and Maddie, thank you both so much for they put this whole presentation together for today, and have just been providing awesome support. I just really appreciate both of you and everyone else who was here with us. That's all. Take care.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop the recording.